Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started here and keep us on track. We're running actually a little bit ahead. If people need to run to the restroom, do that and then just come back. So the way that we usually end the conference is by a panel discussion. And we're really fortunate to have sort of a couple different groups represented here. We've got actual PKU individuals. We have 2 clinicians, and we also have our executive director here that is also a PKU mom. So to the far right, we have Les Clark, who is a PKU individual. We have Olivia Cummings. We have Cary Harding, Christine Brown, and Rani Singh. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to start off. I'm going to have a handful of questions that we're going to be asking. And as they go through, I think the 3 individuals here with Cary, Christine, and Rani, sort of everyone knows. But as we start, Les and Olivia really, I don't know that everyone knows who they are. So on the first question, maybe you guys could give a little introduction on sort of your background. So one of the first things is, what is one of the biggest challenges, and I'm going to have everyone on the panel sort of be able to weigh into these. Some will apply to all, and some may only apply to a couple of you. But maybe, Les, you could end up starting. What's one of the biggest challenges living with PKU, and how have you dealt with that? And if you could just sort of give a little background on sort of your experience and how you've gotten here.
Okay. I'm 38. I was diagnosed with PKU when I was 3 weeks old, so I've been on diet for life. I think the biggest challenge about living with PKU is the constant planning and managing, making sure that you have formula, the low protein foods, whatever your treatment is, and just managing that. Fortunately, I have not had big battles with insurance companies. I know a lot of people have struggled with that. So it's just kind of that ongoing management, keeping track of food and formula and the diet, and it's just kind of that ongoing maintenance type thing.
My name is Olivia Cummings. I am 20 years old, and I have classic PKU. I've been on diet for life, and I'm a student at Purdue University, which is about an hour and a half north of here, studying genetic biology. In terms of challenges for PKU, I would just say general inconvenience, whether that comes in terms of going through airport security with a ton of white powder. That tends to be a little suspicious. When it comes to planning social outings, having to plan out your meals, weeks and weeks in advance, which I'm sure everybody does when they go grocery shopping. But it's another thing when you're planning with the dining court that, hey, a week from now I'm going to be there at 1:15 exactly. So that's a little challenging. I'm sure for most people, financial burden is also quite a challenge. I'm very lucky because of the Affordable Care Act. I am still on my parents' insurance for 6 more years. And because of the ACA, I will be able to get insurance after that, despite my pre-existing condition. So that's something I will definitely be considering when I cast my ballot in November, and I would urge all of you to do as well. And basically just general inconvenience. I tend to go into the attitude of PKU with, rather than it being, a catastrophe or a disease, it's an inconvenience that I deal with daily.
So you all know I'm a clinician and a researcher, and since I don't physically have PKU, my biggest challenge is dealing with the reimbursement side of things, and how do I deal with that is to lock myself in the laboratory and make the dietitians deal with all those problems. Right?
So as you all know, I'm Christine Brown. I think just to build upon what Olivia said and what Les said, our children are 10 and 8, so they're getting to be a little bigger. And I remember when they were first diagnosed, and I don't know if Sarah Foster is in the room or not. She's an adult living with PKU who is close to our family. And when I first got to know Sarah, one of the things that she said to me was, your child has PKU. PKU does not have your child. And I think that's really been a mantra for our family and probably for all of you, that I know that we've been focusing on PKU, for the last 3.5 days, and that's been the main focus of everything. But, I think all of us, look at this as, we're not going to let it change what we want for our children, or if you're an adult living with PKU, it doesn't change the goals that you have in your life or what you want. But it is challenging sometimes, and it takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of organization. And my fear at this point is, both of my kids are young, and their levels are really good, and they've always been really good. But my 10-year-old also has ADHD, like I know a lot of people with PKU do. I only have 8 years left with him, and I'm already feeling overwhelmed in terms of how is he going to be able to do everything he needs to do once he leaves my house in order to be successful in managing this disease. And when I talk to people around the country, and I talk to people in Congress or people I sit next to on the plane, I kind of say that, to me, one of the biggest challenges about PKU is this analogy, where if you've ever heard, we're not eating anymore, but if you take a frog and you drop it in boiling water, it jumps out. It saves itself. But if you take a frog and put it in water and slowly heat it up, by the time it realizes what's happening, it's too weak to jump out, and it dies. So when I think about the challenges, particularly among teens and adults, and how it gets more difficult for many people as they get older to control those levels with what we currently have, to me, when you have higher Phe levels, the things that you lose the first are the skills that you need in order to successfully manage this disorder. And so that's kind of what my challenge is right now, is, even with my well-controlled kids, they already have some executive function, attention types of issues, and how the heck am I going to do this and try to create a structure for them that they can take with them so they're successful? Because I'm really afraid that, they're going to start to have more issues, and pretty soon it's going to almost be too late for them, and they're not going to have the skills they need to track everything that they need to in order to be successful.
Are frog legs on the PKU food list?
Frog legs are not on the PKU list, but I did pet the toad yesterday.
I think Cary already alluded to the challenges as a dietitian. We do get very bonded with the children because we start working with them, they're babies, and now with me being in the field over 25 years, they're adults, so the biggest challenge when they cannot get their formula or their food the way they want, or when they are traveling, we feel very responsible to be able to be there to help and make sure whether they're getting pregnant. Every time a pregnant woman goes through a delivery, I feel like I had delivered a baby, because it's like you walk with them every week, to help manage. So, but it's not only getting access to resources, harmonization of practice was another issue. That's why we have come up with guidelines to make sure they're getting the message, and keeping them motivated to keep coming back to the clinic to offer something new, to be able to do what Christine is saying. When they leave the parents, how are they going to co-op? So we feel we also play a role with that, preparing them for college, helping them. How do we excite them to take charge of their own lives and transitioning from depending on parents to taking charge in their own life? So those are all the challenges as we go along. But I think we've come a long way. I want to stay optimistic from when I started and when I reflect. So I don't want it's gloomy, because I think things are changing, organizations, we are coming with solutions. So despite I think at this time, one thing which I would like to give up is fighting with insurance for medical food would be my highest priority.
So the next question I'm going to address, at least for Olivia to start on, and I'm going to brag a little bit about her for her parents. Olivia, like she said, is a classic PKU, and she has done an incredible job, and her family's done an incredible job managing her disorder. She's also was the valedictorian of her high school. And my understanding is college is going quite well, and she's going into the science end of things. But one of the things I was going to ask her is, what advice do you have to give out to some of the people on how techniques or things that you may have done to help manage this, or what advice you've given people on how things you've done, challenges you've had to go through to be able to be such a successful individual?
Well, I definitely think my parents played a big role in that. They have taught me from a very young age that this is a challenge, but like Christine said, PKU does not have a hold of you, so don't let that stop you from doing anything that you want to do, which includes going to school, partaking in all of the social activities, going to college no matter how far away it might be, studying abroad, things like that. So that attitude has definitely been a strong outlook that has helped me. But in terms of like daily things, I would say my biggest suggestion is make sure your kids like vegetables. And I don't mean that lightly. The low protein foods are great, but vegetables really should be the core of our diet. And it really, really helps if you like vegetables across the board, and if you are open to trying new things. When you already have a limited diet, you want to like everything that you can eat. So just make sure you expose your children to as many things as you can, and that definitely applies to different ethnic foods. At least in my experience, American restaurants are the worst idea. It's French fries and salad, and it's never a good meal. But if you expose yourself to all of these different cultures, you'll find that ethnic restaurants really have some of the best options. Thai food, Cambodian food, Japanese food, Vietnamese food, Ethiopian food, Greek food, I could go on and on. Like American food, Everything else, so much better. And I've been lucky enough to do some traveling, and I'll tell you that the United States has been the least accommodating when it comes to eating out. So when you think about traveling abroad, a place where you may not speak the language, don't let that stop you, because in many other cultures, they value vegetables more than we do, and they value accommodation at restaurants more than we do. And I know that's because of health codes, which are here for important reasons. But in a lot of other countries, they are willing to cook your pasta for you at the restaurants, and they're just super accommodating, so don't let that stop you at all. But in general, I encourage variety as much as possible, and don't be afraid to explain PKU to people. When you're a little kid, a lot of other little kids think it's pretty cool. And then when you get older, if you're in a science field like I am, everybody thinks it's super cool. And instead of asking, that's a bummer, you can't eat this, instead we end up talking about enzyme functionality, which is so much better. So.
Les, do you have any comments around that?
I think what has already been said is pretty much, don't let PKU stop you, or for parents, for your children to do what they want to do. It may make things a little more difficult in certain situations, but it's a challenge. But don't let it stop you. PKU does not own you. Just work. There's accommodations. There's a huge variety of strategies to manage PKU now, with different foods, different formulas, Kuvan, hopefully PegPal soon. So there's a wide variety of things to do to manage PKU. What works for me may not work for someone else, but I've, even this conference, I've learned different things to try, different foods, different formulas and treatments. So, it's constantly learning and changing and adapting, and finding new ways to manage the diet so that you can do what you want to do. If you want to travel, if you want to do certain things, figure out a way to do it.
So Rani and Cary, what are some suggestions that you guys could have around how some of these new parents or even to old parents could better leverage the clinic or the resources that they have available, that maybe you've seen sort of people that have really grown and benefited from it, but some others that have maybe not taken the full advantage that you guys have with your clinic?
I'm thinking.
Yeah, you want to?
Go ahead.
He's thinking.
I think, okay. I do feel keeping up with the clinic is critical, and I realize that how many patients, adult patients, had dropped out of our clinic until BioMarin came with QandA as an option for treatment, because they felt they were just coming to the clinic to be told their level is high, and the clinicians were not taking enough time to say, what do you do about it? What are the resources for you? So as clinicians, we need to be more sensitive to make sure when the time comes in, people don't want to hear their levels are just high. They want solutions and partnerships. And I think that way BioMarin helped in mobilizing the community for so many large patients who we had lost to go from the clinic. And the other problem I felt was that there's limited resources, like manpower in the clinics in general. They're underfunded with genetics, and particularly dietitians can't even bill for their time. So the numbers and the volumes are small. We've got to change that also. But at the same time, now with technology, we should be creative to look at new ways of communication. We text our patients, we email our patients with the results. And also, I think just being in touch to what new is happening. There's a lot of new things, as you heard in this conference, so the families need to be aware how to leverage some of the story. The method of communications can change, I think, rather than just through direct clinic visits. The gatherings which are happening, the tours, partnering with industry even, to do some of the activities which has brought. We have made low-protein food lists which are available from grocery store with the BioMarin dietitians. And also when they visit home, we are finding what resources families have at home. And I was shocked. So some of my families don't even have the blenders and things, some basic things, and we are telling them in the clinic, do this, do that. So we got to know the spectrum of what really is available to the family, so more dialogue and communication.
So and that made me think of one thing, and why certainly some of my patients avoid coming to clinic is obviously they don't either want to admit that they, one, have done no levels, or that, they're all elevated or whatever. And I think sometimes this adversarial thing, and maybe this is advice for clinicians, not so much the patients. I mean, I've become convinced that as someone, gets older, it's not just that, people want to eat the same thing that the rest of their friends do, that it biologically becomes more difficult to keep your Phe levels down. And I've been in clinics where I'm certain that people have, laid the blame at the feet of the families, and I think that's misplaced. I mean, sometimes that's true, but I don't think people should be made to feel guilty that they can't keep their blood fees under control, because it's just really damn hard to do. So I don't in any way, blame individuals or families, unless that's just been complete neglect, which we do occasionally see. So I try to build, again, like Rani has said, to be much more supportive and trying to find ways of getting these things down. Probably the biggest frustration is when that barrier is, reimbursement and getting food. Then that really becomes a tragic situation.
So I know that a couple of the breakout sessions we talked about leveraging sort of the National PKU organization, but sort of on those same lines, Christine and Les, maybe how you guys could talk about what you guys see when people have leveraged the NPKUA as a resource, or what maybe people don't even know that they have there. I know we've talked about it in different forums, but not everyone may have heard those. So maybe Christine, you or Les could talk about that.
Sure. So you have to remember that the National PKU Alliance was founded in a different way, I think, than a lot of other patient advocacy organizations. So we were actually formed by 17 different state and regional organizations across the country. So we were formed from the bottom up versus starting at the top and then, forming chapters, top down. And, while at the national level, I'm able to connect people to one another, there's several times a month where, I get emails or phone calls from someone, everything from, I have a brother who has PKU and I just found out he should still be on treatment, to, someone a male in his 20s who had never met another PKU patient before, to, families struggling and wondering about, what to do about a 504 or an IEP. So, I do kind of maintain this informal list and oftentimes reach out to Les or reach out to others in the community or other parents in specific areas to try to connect folks. But it's really important, I think, to get involved at the local level. And, through our affiliate organizations, I know we're not everywhere, but I think we cover like 34 states. And, we have a couple new organizations as well. I know that Alabama recently got organized and we're supporting that effort. Some other Western states have come under the IPAD, the Intermountain PKU and Allied Disorders umbrella, those types of things. And I think it's just so important to get involved and stay engaged at the local level. I know for Kevin and I, and we all have that journey as parents in terms of how you accept this diagnosis of PKU. And for us, it was really meeting with other families and talking to other moms and getting ideas from them. And still, I don't know everything. I feel very fortunate that I have a lot of access that maybe most families don't, because I'm also traveling to scientific meetings and, I know so many of the clinics around the country. But I still struggle like everybody else does, and I still lean on a key group of moms. When I run into something new, I'm on the phone or I'm on a Facebook message or something else like, oh my gosh, this just happened. Now what do I do? How do I deal with this? And so, I think just to continue to rely on one another, and I think that's too, why these conferences have become so popular. And I kind of feel like we have groupies, which is pretty cool, wherever you're going to be in 2 years, we're going to be there, and I want to know the date, and we're going to already make plans and save up funds. And I think that's because, all these sessions are amazing, all the scientific stuff is great, and the breakouts, but I think that you learn just as much from one another and sharing what's worked for you and just bouncing those ideas off. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I had to say, Christine already said.
You got to come up with something
I
new.
have to come up with some original material, but I think really, as far as what has changed, what the NPKUA has really done is the social, for me at least, the connections. Growing up in Nebraska in the pre-Facebook, pre-email, pre-internet age, I met other kids with PKU twice a year when I went to clinic, and then we did a picnic type thing, but it was 2 days a year, and then the rest of the time was I knew nobody, I talked to nobody else with PKU, and now with having all the various support groups and the connections and the conferences, you get to meet other people with PKU. You realize that, hey, I'm not the only one that is facing these issues. There's other people out there. The exchange of ideas, getting involved with the research, what NPKUA is doing with the maternal PKU, establishing the social and the support network. I think that is so helpful and so important to know that we're a small community, but there's a lot of us out there, and it's just the matter of getting everybody connected. And I think that's really been helpful for me. And like Christine said, there's, okay, where's the next conference? I'm making my travel arrangements. I will be there. So I think that's the important thing, and just the social and the networking part that's really, really helped me a lot.
So Cary, all the years that you've been doing this, what are some of the factors that you could reach out to? Because I think you've got the whole smattering of people from the newborns to adults with PKU. What are some of the major successes that you've seen that have helped people along as they go along the journey? Because the worries that people have when they're that newborn and then when they're the toddler and then moving into adolescence, what are some things you've seen with people that have continued to have that success since you've been able to see them over the year, and Rani also, of how they've progressed that you could potentially give some advice, especially to some of the younger parents or grandparents out there?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, a lot of it is not much I can do about. Ronnie will second this or not. I can usually tell when I first meet a family how well things are going to go in the long run. And it's all about family support. And, so if there isn't grandma and grandpa, sometimes that makes it harder. Again, those aren't things that I can help with, but the social media thing I think has helped a lot, because the families where that doesn't exist, potentially we can get them hooked up with experienced individuals and be able to help them. But I think those are the families that struggle the most, or certainly they're like the single moms who have absolutely no support system. And that, another frustrating place is the inability for our global system to support them very well, and some of those cases are really difficult. So it's the village. Rani, you want to?
Rani.
So that's one time I love being old, because when I meet a new parent, I can tell them when I first started that we used to mix our own amino acid mixtures, and how lucky they are that their baby is going to have about 50 different options, and also the network of family and the support which comes through locally. We have, for example, in Georgia, Georgia PKU, where they have their own picnic now. And when I did the first camp 22 years ago, 99% of the girls had not met another girl with PKU, and they were crying when they left. So I'm able to tell them a story about how long we have come. The other thing which has been very fascinating for me personally as a clinician in the last 5 or 10 years is how the evolution of treatments has affected. When I see them in a camp setting, 30, 40 people together and feeding them for a week, the people who are just on diet, the people who are on QandA, and the people who are on PEG-PAL. And I know Cary could not tell you much about PEG-PAL, but I had 5 girls in the camp this year who were on PEG-PAL. And they wanted to, I used to have a counselor's food with all these meats and other things, and then the low protein buffet. And I would have to order so much more extra food with the counselors now, because 50% of the girls could come and share what we were eating, and that's fascinating to me. But the planning has become so complex because it's not as clear-cut anymore. There's a whole spectrum from very strict to very liberal diet. And the girls, and I wanted to tell Sean that, with the PEG-PAL, I am seeing the girls who had come before because these were really classic PKUs. And when I observe them clinically, I see a big difference in their functioning. And I'm fascinated. I mean, this is a very, very small group, but I spend a week with them, and I've spent time with them before in group. And when I see that effect, it's very gratifying. So I think just being able to share with them the opportunities for treatment, the opportunities for foods, the opportunities for access to professionals through technology, all this is, to me, the way I feel connecting with the families.
Good. So many times we are always set where we're talking about PKU and the things, the challenges, and all the issues that we have that we have to try and overcome. What I was wondering if Les, maybe you could start and come all the way down the panel on maybe give an example of something that's actually really positive that's come out of having PKU or being part of the PKU community that you wouldn't have had without being associated with this disorder?
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, we focus a lot on the challenges, and especially this weekend, we've really been focused on PKU. But honestly, I go for days at a time without thinking about PKU specifically. It's just, this is my diet. I drink the formula. This is, kind of the way it is. So I think as far as positives about PKU, like I've mentioned before, the social aspects, being able to go places and meet other people with PKU. And then I guess it's given me a different perspective on, everybody has something, everybody has a challenge, whether that's PKU, diabetes, some sort of disability. It's given me a different perspective that, we all have challenges, we all have struggles, and to give people a chance to try to understand where they're coming from and to be able to help them, however that is, whether that's, if somebody needs formula, hey, I can send you a case or whatever you need, or hey, somebody just needs somebody to talk to, an understanding. So I think it's just a perspective that everybody has their own challenges. They all may be different, but if we work together, we can overcome those.
I would definitely agree with Les on that it's given me a unique perspective on the fact that everybody has something going on. And me having to need accommodations quite often has made me aware that other people also need accommodations. And I think having PKU and being aware of PKU generally makes you a more accepting and compassionate person when it comes to dealing with things that other people are also dealing with. In addition, I think PKU has made me like a pretty healthy eater, actually, and I'd say my family would agree with that. Of course, vegetables were in the diet before I came along, but I'm sure I helped out. And I've actually made a ton of really interesting vegan friends, because when I talk about my diet, if I don't feel like explaining it, I'll just be like, oh, I'm vegan, also gluten-free and nut-free. And I've made a lot of friends that way, actually. So I have a whole vegan cohort at Purdue, which is pretty fun. And it's made me aware of some vegan issues as well. So I guess I'm more informed in that respect. But also I'd say the most positive impact PKU has had on my life is deciding basically what I want to do with the rest of my life. I remember my freshman biology class in high school. I didn't really care for it. But I decided I was going to go ahead and take the next year of a genetics course because I thought, they're going to focus on PKU. It's going to be so interesting, and I'm totally going to ace it. And so I took the course, and it was out of the entire year, it was 15 minutes of PKU, which ended up being the least interesting thing to me, actually. But it's because of PKU that I took that class, and it's been my favorite class I've ever taken. And now I'm at an incredible university studying genetic biology, and I never would have been exposed to that field had I not had PKU, and I think I'm going to be really happy in the field, and I've chosen a great career path basically because of this exposure that PKU has given me.
So I have to give credit to PKU for the genesis of my entire career, so. How much better can that, people ask me, how did you get into this? And I don't really honestly know. And I am firmly convinced that it was God's intention that I do this. I don't want to make that sound too grandiose or whatever, but it just like everything had always just sort of, I went into pediatrics, but everybody assumed I was going to be a geneticist. And when I did my genetics training, it was just sort of obvious he was going to the metabolic clinic. And the PKU mouse showed up at the University of Wisconsin at the exact same time that I was there. And that obviously was the largest numbers of our patients in clinic. And it just ended up being the focus. And beyond the opportunity to be able to do that and, meet so many great families and meet patients and try to help them, but realize that, things aren't perfect and that we need new options and new therapies. I mean, that's been the genesis of my whole career. And then the opportunity to I thought that the giants before me had learned everything there is to know about phenylalanine biology, and that turns out to be almost completely not true. So the more I learn, the less I understand. But the opportunity to, interact with a lot of really brilliant scientists all over the world has really been an amazing experience for me. And the days that you're sitting in a scientific meeting and suddenly everybody kind of comes to the same insight at one time, you can't replace that. That's just an amazing, and I still truly think that is also a divine experience when that sort of insight occurs. And I absolutely have to give PKU credit for my entire scientific career, for sure.
Well, I'll be grandiose and philosophical for you as well, Cary. So from a very young age for me, I've always been interested in social change. I've been interested in social justice. I've been interested in speaking for people who had no voice. And I have a really strange resume, I think, before coming to the National PKU Alliance. And, I worked with torture victims in South Africa. I worked with war refugees from the Liberian War that were in refugee camps in Cote d'Ivoire. I worked with victims of domestic and sexual assault here in the United States. All these people who really had no voice. And to then have 2 children that were born with this rare disease, for me, I feel like I'm part of something larger now than myself. And by having a national organization for PKU, I feel like for the first time in this country that we have a national voice. And I really feel that we can make an impact. And I think that rare diseases are like this in general, but we all have access to Cary Harding and to Sean Christ and to Rani Singh and to people who are studying PKU and looking at new therapies and looking at new ideas, and we can have people that can run a golf tournament in Virginia and have that money go to supporting some of these people and some of these science things. And I think all of us, no matter what your passion is or what you do in your life or what your job is or what you're studying in college, or what subject you like in high school, I think all of us really with your life, you want to leave some sort of legacy, and you want to leave some sort of mark in the world. And that's what I hope to do, and that's what I know that all of you are hoping to do with us, is to make that mark and to make that legacy for PKU.
I feel very fortunate to be sitting next to people, this panel. I always think it was my karma. I say, I don't know how I got transplanted from a little place in India to Atlanta, Georgia, and got involved with this cause for my passion for nutrition. And when I did my genetics fellowship, people laughed about, Tony, why are you combining nutrition and genetics? And then I fell into the clinic, PKU clinic, and there was not a better combination to get the voice out and understand the sciences behind it and the power of using nutrition to manage the genetic disorders. So having said that, and I know I was working in a lab before, but when I started, I was a registered dietitian, went back in the clinic, and Dr. Elsa's told me after my fellowship, and I was doing clinical research, and then I also had my own kids at that time, and he asked me if I wanted to continue and do the lab work, and I struggled a lot. And my husband at that time told me, just do what you love. And I knew I loved the clinic, and I loved the clinical research, but I knew I couldn't do it all. So I went to him and I said, I don't think I can continue the lab work, but lab work was so much highly valued than clinical work and clinical research that I knew he may fire me and never give me a job. And he looked at me real funny. He says, I am disappointed in you, but I will let you continue here. So I'm still here, and I think about him, and I thank him for the opportunity. And because I feel nothing is more powerful about the impact of nutrition than this. But I also feel what PKU has taught me, I want to comment by saying the young adults, what is impressive to me is we felt very responsible and the parents felt very responsible, but in the last few years, I see the young adults are going to take charge of this. You will see in this organization even, I had 2 best assistant counselors who are studying to be registered dietitians. One is a chemistry major and one a genetic counselor with PKU. So to me, having to treat somebody from a mental institution, to put them on a diet when I first started, and to see these people getting college degrees, and 2 of our kiddos, one getting into Georgia Tech and one into Emory this year, is the biggest compliment to the young adults. And I say we stay positive and optimistic to know that the treatment works, regardless of these little things we'll be working on.
So before we open it up for some questions, I'd like each one of the panelists to be able to you've been able to listen and see and be part of this conference, and many of you have obviously been engaged throughout the last 6, 7, 8 years that this organization's been, founded and moving forward. What are one of your hopes or dreams that this organization could continue to do, or from a treatment standpoint, that you see that you'd like us to continue to push forward with, or the organization as a whole?
Well, I guess I will start out, and I know, Christine, in your presentation, you did the list of the objectives for the NPKUA, but I think the most important and most immediate thing that I'd like to see is some sort of national legislation requirements for insurance coverage of medical foods and formulas. As a short term, that's probably the most important thing that we could do right now, is to be advocates for that, make sure that families get access to the foods and the formulas that they need to treat the condition now. Now, ultimately, I think we all want to see a cure. We want to see new foods, new formulas, but right now, there's so many families, and I've been blessed with good insurance. I've had the battles with the insurance company, like I think just about everybody has, but they cover what I need, and I feel very fortunate about that. But I know there's lots of families who struggle with coverage and getting the foods and the formulas that they need. So I think that's the most important thing that the NPKUA and everybody in the community can do right now.
I would definitely agree with Les on both of those points, and I would add in that increasing variety in the low-protein foods would be a great thing to see. I feel like I'm an old dog when it comes to these sorts of foods, because a lot of the variety came about when I was already a teenager, and at that point my palate had already formed. So most of the foods out in the hallway I don't actually care for, but I know that it's really, really great for the younger kids, so I hope for their sake that there's an increased variety of options. And of course, a cure, I hope for the sake of others that there's a cure, but if I'm being very frank, I don't know what I would do with a cure in my life right now. I was on the QandA clinical trial about 5 years ago, and there was a period of time where they upped my Phe tolerance by like 75 milligrams, and I didn't know what to eat. There was a period of time we had to put like an ounce of like cow's milk in my formula just to get enough protein in, and then it turned out I was lactose intolerant, which of course I am. So that didn't work out too well. But I hope for everybody else that wants a cure that there is a cure. I'm just not sure what I would do with it.
Yeah. So I absolutely second the legislative initiative, and I cannot overemphasize the impact that parent and family groups have that is way beyond we as professionals. We get looked at the legislative level as being somewhat self-serving. But the way things have gone, I've done a lot of testifying in the state of Oregon. We're fortunate we have a law that our dietitian, Kathleen Huntington, who's now retired, first started more than 20 years ago and got pushed through that requires insurance companies to pay for formula and medical foods. Not that they don't still fight us. They try. But the way that had gone is they had gotten, the naysayers had gotten a loophole into a couple loopholes in the bill, and one of them was that it would sunset every 7 years, and so you had to go back and fight the fight again. Finally, the last round, they actually got that thrown out and finally got it passed as once and forever, and we don't have to visit this. But the way all of those legislative hearings went is that I would go and I would give a little talk about what PKU is and what the diet's like, et cetera, and how big the outcomes have been. But what absolutely sold every single time was people like Olivia, we have equivalent accomplished individuals coming and talking about how they couldn't live without their formula, et cetera, and how much different their life would have been, and that absolutely had way more impact than anything that I could have said. So I think the presence of the NPKUA is extremely important from the legislative level. The other thing I wanted to say is about novel treatments. So it might be easy to come to a meeting like this, and it's occurred to me that you could get a mixed message, that on one hand we're trumpeting the fact that dietary treatment has been such a terrific success, but on the other hand we're bashing it because it's not perfect. And in a little bit of a way, this is political. So, and we've kind of caused this ourselves. So because of the insurance issue, for my entire career, we've had to champion in front of various organizations, regulators, whatever, that this diet works and this is the only thing that they need, and we have to keep pushing this, and you've got to fund this, and that's, we have no other options. But then when we really study it and realize that, and it's not just a lifestyle issue, that biologically maybe things could be better. So now we have to go preach that, well, yeah, it was good, but it's not perfect. And really what we need are more tools. There's really very few other diseases in the world where we don't have more options. In the number of blood pressure drugs, et cetera, that are out there for different people to try, and not one size fits all. And that's really the true goal. I completely agree with Olivia. I don't know if I would recommend that you get gene therapy if life is fabulous with what you're doing, because there's risks and benefits with every single different treatment approach. I have a lot of dogs in the game, and at this point it's because I cannot predict what will rise to be successful, and I'm being honest about that. And that's partly why I will collaborate with just about anybody, because I can't predict what will be the successful thing, and I hope more than one will be, and then we'll have treatment options, and then it will be a tough decision what to do for an individual, but what a great position that will be to be able to have choice.
You heard obviously what the priorities were of the NPKUA in my opening address on Thursday. And so I just want to kind of do a check here in the room. So everybody raise their hand that lives in the US. How many of you keep your hands raised? If you signed the petition for OPM, the Office of Personal Management, to lift the age limit for our federal employee health benefit programs, put your hand down. The petition is still out there. Get involved, go sign. Put your hands up. I know. If you looked at the action alert that we had out there about the Defense Reauthorization Act that would extend medical foods coverage without age limits to TRICARE, if you looked at the list to see if your representatives were on there or your senators were on there, put your hand down. Go look at the list if you haven't, right? We need you guys to get involved. How many of you, I'll do it now the opposite way, how many of you stopped at the research study tables? Did you guys pick up a survey? Did you look at the survey for medical foods? Did you look if you're a parent to see the other research study about siblings? We actually know from Catherine Deming, they got 14 stool samples from non-PKU and 13 from PKU, but it's not too late. They still have more people out there. You know, in order to drive things forward and in order for us to reach our goals, we need you all, right? We need you all involved. These are simple things you can do in addition to giving your dollars, in addition to looking at who do I know, you know, among my circle of influence or my circle of families and friends that can attend a Lifting the Limits event, can give $25 a year to the NPKUA, can, you know, give money towards research, can give money towards the work we do in advocacy. I know somebody who actually might be able to give to the Ashburn Furling Society. I want to talk to them about this. So the only way that we're going to move anything forward, whether it's research for innovative therapies, whether it's coverage for medical foods on a national basis, whether it's better understanding the basic science of PKU, whether it's better understanding you know, what's happening in the brain and raising our hand that yes, we want our brain scanned, Sean Chris, let's bring a bus to the next conference with an MRI and just walk people through. We all need you in order to do all of those priorities.
Thank you. No pressure on NPKUA, but this is again the model organization for other rare genetic disorders. I feel that MSUD families, propionic acidemia family, everyone who asks me questions about how they are getting organized, but they have resources, and Christine Brown's name come attached with NPKUA, I can tell you that, both in Washington and with the parents group. They all, it's an organization, but she's become a face to taking these messages, what she was doing to us right now, get up and move, and that's basically, and it's wonderful. So it is, I think it's a role model, not only as the first disease to be treated by nutrition and public health program for newborn screening, but also as an organization. I feel you're setting up some standards for other rare genetic diseases, how to formulate this. So I do want to applaud for that.
Absolutely.
The other person I want to applaud in the audience, if I can take a minute, the connection between PKU Alliance and Georgia PKU. I don't know if Christine Vanig, is she here? Is Christine here?
She's way back there.
Oh, yeah. So I want to give her big kudos because she has played a huge role in Georgia to get our legislation efforts with Steve. I don't know if Steve is here? One of the grandpas? Okay.
There he is.
Okay, very good. I want to give you all a very public acknowledgement for helping. So the Georgia has had a legislative pass for medical food. So when I get back, I cannot wait to officially have this in our hands to announce to our patients that we will be able to give medical food in Georgia to them if their insurance issues and help fight with the insurance. And we hope to work with the health economists to gather data for National PKU Alliance and others to offer to serve as a role model and share our knowledge with the other states who will struggle. So we are on the goal to partner with NPKUA to help with access to medical foods. And to me, that's one of the biggest immediate goals. First, what you mentioned. And second, I would add in there fee monitoring. At the point of care, fee monitoring is such a need to help for better compliance and improved outcomes as a tool other than the cures. So I would continue to see us put effort in that. Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to open up some questions. If anyone in the audience has questions for our panel, just raise your hand. They're going to bring you a mic here. We're going to give Casey his last round of workouts.
Is it on? Oh. Wise guy. Olivia, I'd like to ask you if you had any special accommodations during your schooling, such as an IEP, extra aids, or what accommodations you took advantage of.
Great question. So throughout my secondary education, I had no contacts in that way. I know in like first grade, my mom met with some staff member who knew who I was, knew who to look out for, and knew that if I was hungry, she like had snacks for me, but that was pretty much my only contact K through 12. So I brought my lunch every day that Mom packed for me, and I was just, you know, birthday parties when people brought in cupcakes, my teachers would have little bins of low-fee snacks for me, but that was pretty much the extent of that. Now at Purdue, before I started my freshman year, I registered at the Disability Resource Center on campus, and by doing that, they provided protections for me so that I could get into a dorm room that had my own sink, so I could make my formula in a non-community bathroom, which was very vital for me. I'm a bit of a germaphobe to begin with, but the thought of making my formula in a bathroom with 40 other girls was not what I wanted to do. So the DRC definitely helped me get into that room, and they also put me in contact with the head chef at one of the dining courts on our campus. So at Purdue and a lot of universities, there are certain situations where you're required to buy into a meal plan. So at Purdue, if you live in a residence hall, you have to have a meal plan. And by requiring you to have a meal plan, that means the dining court is required to provide food you can eat. Use that to your advantage. I'm pretty sure public schools are the same way, although I didn't take advantage of that. So then at Purdue, I talked to the head chef the summer before I started there, and we set up a meeting. My mother and I set up a meeting with her, and I brought in a plethora of low-protein foods and brought her my own personal recipes and talked to her about what the kitchen could manage and what I wanted, and see where we had similarities. And then she had like a month before school started to like play with my pasta, which I'm sure all of you have cooked it before, know that it doesn't turn out great the first 5 times. And so she had time to work on that. And then how it's worked out for the past 2 years for me is every Sunday night I email her and say, hey, I'm gonna be in for lunch at this time, Monday through Sunday, and this time for dinner. And so then I'd go into the dining court, swipe in, find her, and she would hand me my special foods. And so I would definitely recommend at the university setting especially to take advantage of that. The staff at Purdue especially are just really, really great. I'm Facebook friends with all of the dining court staff. During finals week, they made cookies for me. They were just really, really accommodating. So I definitely, boiler up, hammer down. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of that.
So this question is for Olivia, unless you two are obvious examples of extremely successful individuals who've managed this disability. So I'm a mom of 2 boys, one of which has PKU. He's 5 years old. So what I would ask you is, particularly I think about how regimented I am about tracking, maintaining, recording his food, and that's how I'm going to want him to be. But what did you find successful as either your parents went through or as you guys have started managing your own treatment as far as tracking and just making sure that you're keeping good records?
So when I was younger, we definitely took more careful care, I would say, in that we counted, we added up every day on either like a little notebook my mom would carry with us, or on a little whiteboard we had on the fridge for a period of time. But as I've gotten older, I pretty much eat the same things all the time. So I have a really good idea of how I'm meeting my limit for a day. So for example, I know that if I'm going out to eat that night, I'm probably gonna eat potatoes, and with my Phe tolerance of 325 milligrams, I know I can't have potatoes earlier in the day. So probably by the age of I would say 10, I was pretty aware of that. And so if I knew that I was eating potatoes or chips or something that was high Phe, then I would go through and add up in my head. But besides days like that, I would say I'm on the simplified diet, which I actually didn't know was a thing. I just thought it was me being lazy, but apparently it's a thing. So I would definitely suggest that as you get a sense for what your day-to-day is going to be like. So that was helpful.
And I think my story is pretty similar. When I was 5, my parents kept track of everything, in a notebook, and kept a running total of how much I consumed and how much I had left. And we pretty much continued that on through about middle school, when I kind of got into a pattern of what I was eating and basically how much protein was in it. And then we kind of just did, I guess it was pretty much the simplified diet without so much calling it that. And where I eat a lot of the same things day after day, it's pretty predictable. And I got to where I just do, okay, I'm going out to eat tonight, so I'm going to have, low-fee lunch and breakfast. And over time, it does kind of even out. Now, I got a little off track in college, but what I've started doing now is using there's several apps out that are helpful for tracking general weight loss diet trackers. I use MyFitnessPal, and that counts the grams of protein, and that's sufficient to keep me in track with my tolerance and being on Kuvan. So I think as you get older, it gets, I'm not going to say easier, but tracking to the exact milligram becomes less of a hassle as you kind of establish patterns throughout life. So, and it's whatever works for you.
It is.
Everybody does it different based on what I've seen, even at this conference, the huge range of protein tolerances from 350 milligrams, where you have to track every single one, to people who can have 40, 50, 60 grams of protein and eat pretty much a normal diet. So it's going to be real variable, and I know each clinic has different things that they want to do. So really work with your clinic and what works with your family.
And I would just like to add to that, my 2 kids with PKU are classic as well. And so we actually just switched to my simplified diet about 3 months ago, after I heard about it at the Genetic Metabolic Dietitians International meeting, because with Connor being 10, I want him to start tracking his own Phe. And it's a lot easier for him to count 6 grams of protein a day, which is what he gets on the simplified diet, versus 360 milligrams of Phe. And so, I really like this, and I knew about it too late to have a breakout session, here. But a lot of the dietitians are aware of it. They're the ones that developed it. The dietitian I know at OHSU, we have like her chart on the inside of our cupboard, and so our kids can look at it and they can see what they have to count and what they don't have to count, essentially. And so for us, it's just a further step, in that responsibility. So if you're interested in that, or want to learn more about that, I would really talk to your clinic. And all those dietitians have tremendous resources on the GMDI website, and presentations and handouts that have been developed by a number of dietitians across the country. So I'm really excited about that, because I feel, for those of us that want to try something different than just counting milligrams of phenylalanine, that it's going to be a really good tool, especially to give that responsibility to to my children as they get older and before they head out to college, where it might be a little harder to track everything. Yeah.
See, from the other side, we had done a study with a student about 15 years ago, and what we found was if the center of the plate was a salad or a vegetable, and one low protein for very classical PKUs and a modified low protein, and then they could pretty much, it was fruits and vegetables were, even if they went a little over, was not as bad. And so we know that, and so being so precise and just getting into the habit of making a vegetable and a salad as the center of the meal rather than, which most of you do, but I just thought I'll reinforce that the habits from the very early on helped.
Hi. Our clinic actually wanted us to come, well, we were coming anyway, but asked us to find out information about the simplified diet. I don't think they're very aware of the actual diet. Is there any information online or that we could get access to understand it?
Yeah, so at GMDI we have just published the whole PKU guidelines on web-based. guidelines, and they're open to all the public, and we have also published some toolkits and resources. And I'll go back and make sure that the simplified tool is kind of more obvious in there, and then maybe we can also link that with the National PKU Alliance as we work towards that.
And I mean, really, you do need to work with your clinic. I know when I brought it back, my dietitian that I have wasn't aware of it, so she hooked up with some dietitians that had presented. And I mean, we tracked the boys' Phe levels, weekly for I think 5 or 6 weeks to make sure that everything was going okay. But like essentially, in our experience, I mean, both of my boys get about between 6 and 8 grams of natural protein a day. So I mean, they're very classic. And so essentially what the simplified diet does is you work with your dietitian, they look at your meal records and decide how they're going to drop it down. So like our dietitians dropped my kids down to 6 grams of protein a day, but they no longer have to count any fruits. All fruits are free. Some vegetables are free. And then some vegetables are 1 gram, and some vegetables are 2 grams, and a plate of French fries is 3 grams. And then you have to count your low protein foods as 1 gram or more if they're more than 50 milligrams of Phe per serving. So we've actually found too, like now we're using howmuchphe.org more to make sure that, we're counting the stuff right, that, we've also just been adding up in our heads. And so it's a really easy way to track. And, my kids can remember 6 a lot better and get to 6, versus trying to remember 360 milligrams of Phe, and an apple has 9 milligrams, and half a cup of Frosted Flakes has 54, and all those other things. It's just so much easy, and I probably got those wrong, I know, Sarah. But it's just easier, and for me, it's a way that I want my kids to start taking control of that. And their Phe levels have always been really good for the most part, and always within range. And through this transition that we've done, I mean, all of their levels have come back between 2 and 3. Whereas before, sometimes we had a 4, or sometimes we had a 5. So I haven't seen, and our dietitian hasn't seen, any change. If anything, it's actually even gotten a little bit better within that range. But because everybody has a different diet and you have different food records, it's something you really need to do with your dietitian, and you need to do some more frequent blood monitoring, and they might have to adjust kind of how many grams of protein, they're saying that either you can have or your child can have. But I mean, use it as a tool. I mean, go email, right? When you go home, email your dietitian and say, hey, I heard about this, I'm interested in it, do you know about it? When can we talk about this? If it's something that you really want to get more information on and perhaps try.
I have a question for Les. A lot of the classes that I've been to, I feel like it's a little bit easy. It's so hard for girls with PKU, but at least growing up, they're more willing to talk to their parents and their friends. How hard is it for boys, and how hard is it as you're growing up, meeting friends, going to sports and trying to be cool with your friends and stuff? What can we do as parents to help, but not be so overbearing and not being so nagging? You know what I mean? I feel like the boys don't talk, so we don't know, but we just really want to be there to help.
That's true. Yeah, I think, and I'm hearing that from the rest of the panel, it is pretty true that in most cases, girls are more willing to talk and open up about things like that. Boys want to be strong and macho, and I have no problems, and I'll take care of it myself. But I think the real important thing, and this is probably more than just PKU, is to be there when your boys are willing to talk and sit down and discuss it. Be there, listen to them, work with them. I think the thing that really helped with my parents is there were certain things that were non-negotiable. I would drink my formula. I don't ever remember, I didn't like it, but I don't ever remember arguing over it. It was just this was not negotiable. There were other things that we talked about, we negotiated. Hey, I don't like doing this. Do I have to eat this, or can we work out a different meal plan type thing? So I think it's important just to have that relationship with your children, with your boys especially, that they're willing to come to you. I think girls and boys are different. The middle school was a struggle for me because I wasn't into sports, And going to a small school, it was, if you didn't play football, you were nobody. I'm like, well, I was content to be a nobody because I didn't want to be a tackling dummy. So, but it's you have to find something that your children are interested in, whether that's boys or girls, and have something in common with them, whether it's cheerleading or football or the chess club or something. Try to introduce them to a variety of things so you can come up with something in common, to use that as a basis of conversation that you can lead into discussions on the diet and whatever else in life. So that's my Parenting 101 class, for what it's worth.
And I also tell Les this all the time, that as a mother of 2 boys with PKU, that I'm depending on people like him and people like Kevin Alexander and Aiden Doyle and Kurt Sensenbrenner and some of the other adult men here with PKU, that I know eventually my kids aren't going to listen to me, but hopefully they'll listen to you. And so I think it's really important that those of us that are parents of children with PKU, that teens and adults with PKU are some of our best resources, and we need to depend on them and learn from them and learn from their experiences. But it takes a village, and they're part of our village.
Any other questions out there for the panel?
Last one?
Last one, yeah.
All right.
Leo.
Thanks, Nolan. So this question is for Les. You said in college you had some difficulties. We have a 17-year-old that's going to be a senior in high school, and I guess twofold question. Did you, Olivia, you mentioned you had some accommodations, but I understand those mainly were in regards to help with your diet in the cafeteria at school. Ethan has accommodations for extended time and that kind of thing. Did you have any of that, Les? And then secondly, you mentioned you had difficulties in college. How did you get yourself back on track?
Right, the first question, I met with some of the dietary staff and the residential life people. I decided that my experience was I had sufficient variety with the different buffet lines and the different options, that I didn't need to do some of the things that Olivia did as far as having them cook my pasta or anything like that. I did go to a different dorm where I had access to an actual kitchen so that I could do some cooking on my own, make some low-protein pasta and keep that in my refrigerator in my dorm room. But as far as meal plans, I just kind of picked and chose, and that kind of led into my getting a little off track, is sometimes I didn't choose very wisely when I went through the buffet line. So it's like, and it was my first experience away from home is kind of like there's nobody watching over my shoulder what I'm doing, what I'm eating. I got into didn't really go off diet, but I was eating a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have, and my problem was more quantities, as far as, okay, instead of having a small serving of French fries, I'm going to have 2, that kind of stuff. So my levels got a little high, and I noticed that I was, behavior changes, I couldn't concentrate as well. With me, when my levels are high, I get kind of that irritated, kind of that road rage feeling. I think a lot of people can relate to that. So, and I knew this was going on, and kind of sat down and realized that, hey, my levels have gone up over the last couple months. I need to get back on track. So I kind of realized it myself. I think my parents, when I'd go home on the weekends, kind of noticed some behavior was a little different. So I think I caught it before it got seriously off track. But that's something that as parents, it's helpful to have somebody watching over my shoulder occasionally. So what you can do is kind of as your children go off to school, maintain contact. If they come visit, don't nag about, hey, have you drank your formula? Are you eating right? But just, hey, I've noticed your behavior is a little different. Are are you having issues? What's going on? Type things. So that's you know, every situation is different and every relationship is different. So it's, as a teenager, as a freshman in college, I did not want my parents, nagging me, but it was good to say, have my mom say, hey, are you doing what you're supposed to? So it's, kind of just kind of feel it out a little bit. And it's a very stressful time in life, going from home to college, being on your own and making new friends and new relationships. So it's a lot of transitions going on right in that time frame. So.
Can I comment on that real quick? So Mark Twain, I think, had the best quote ever about adolescence, which was in his personal experience that when he was 14 years old, that he thought his father was the stupidest animal on the face of the planet, but that by the time that Mark had turned 21, he couldn't believe how much his father had learned in that period of time. So it's, everybody goes through this developmental phase, and just keep praying that they'll come through, right?
I would just add in that, as Les said, college is hard, and you need to be a little forgiving. I know this past semester, after every biochemistry exam I'd go to the dining court, put my headphones in, watch Netflix, and eat just like a plate of French fries, because I needed to do that after like the hardest exam I'd ever had in my life, right? Each exam's the hardest exam I've ever had in my life, and I have a feeling it's gonna be that way for the next 10 years throughout medical school. So it's just important that, like, yes, you want to stay on track, you want to be diligent, but also be forgiving.
And one big plate of French fries isn't going to screw anything up.
All right, well, I'd like to thank our panel for taking the time and answering all the questions. Really appreciate it. Okay, so with that, I'd like to actually sort of close out the conference here. And we couldn't have done this without you, but we also couldn't have done it without all of our sponsors. So I thank them very much for all the people that have donated to make this what it's come to be. It's incredible to see where we've come over the last 4 conferences, and it's not only from your donations, but also the volunteers that are here. So I'd like to give everyone a round of applause on those volunteers.